Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a pretty incredible trip back in time, specifically to a New England farm in October of 1834. We're going to be looking at the completely parallel yet distinct lives of two siblings, a young woman named Clarissa and a young man named James. Through their eyes, we get to explore just a single day. But it's a day defined by absolutely relentless physical work, strictly separated spheres of duty, and honestly, an incredibly profound, silent love that held their whole family together. Right, let's just jump straight into it way before dawn. Imagine you're 14-year-old Clarissa. Your day definitely doesn't start with a smartphone alarm. No, it starts with the familiar, heavy sounds of duty. Hearing her father's boots on the stairs, that's the signal that the family's survival cycle is starting all over again. Before she even opens her eyes, she knows she's got to get up, get that kettle going, and face a massive day of grueling labor. To really get a feel for their world, we have to grasp the chronological rhythm of a 19th century day. It's totally unrelentless, ruled entirely by the sun and the seasons. At dawn, it's all about getting the fire started. Then the morning splits into intense labor, washing indoors and harvesting outdoors. By afternoon, things shift to more specialized skills like mending and coopering. And finally, dusk brings everyone back together for supper, maybe a brief moment of shared reading, before exhaustion just completely takes over. Now take a look at the exact hierarchy of the Hildreth family. You've got the parents right at the top, leading by example. Then James at 17 and Clarissa at 14, both stepping firmly into adult roles. Just behind them are Elizabeth and Milo, totally eager to prove their worth, and the absolute youngest, Edward and Moses, who are mostly just underfoot at this point. Clarissa actually notes this really beautiful, inevitable progression, where everyone in the house just naturally moves up a step of responsibility the second the next child comes along behind them. So, let's kick things off with Section 1, waking before the sun and those early morning duties. It's fascinating because despite being separated in their tasks, Clarissa and James actually share the exact same mindset. You have Clarissa slicing bread and minding the porridge completely voluntarily. Why? Because she absolutely loves that look of approval her mother gives her when she takes initiative. Meanwhile, 17-year-old James is bracing the early cold to get downstairs before his younger brother Milo. He takes this quiet, unspoken pride in beating him to the punch. Both of them are just desperately trying to prove their maturity before the sun even peeks over the horizon. Moving right along to Section 2, we'll look at Clarissa's sphere, which focuses on indoor labor. You see, today is washing day. And let me tell you, in 1834, that meant scrubbing clothes grayed from summer dirt with incredibly harsh lye soap. The visceral reality of this task meant immense physical pain. Clarissa's hands are aching before she's even halfway through the morning. But here's the kicker. She absolutely refuses to complain. And the reason why? She'd be deeply ashamed to appear softer than her mother. Speaking of her mother, she's 44 years old. Originally from the Sawtell family, she married younger than her husband. And in Clarissa's entire 14 years of life, her mother has literally never sat idle for a single day. Not one. She is the ultimate matriarch. And her quiet, relentless endurance sets this almost impossible standard that Clarissa strives to meet every single morning. Now, let's shift gears to Section 3, James's sphere, and his work out in the fields. Well, before the sun is fully up, James, his father, and young Milo are already out at the cornfield with the wagon. James spends his entire morning doing back-breaking work, testing stalks, cutting, husking, hauling. It's the kind of intense manual labor that leaves a guy's body completely aching by noon. But, as James notes, it also leaves his mind totally free. Free to observe, to think, and to learn from the master right beside him, his father. Right in the middle of all this hauling, his dad asks a seemingly simple mid-morning question. Does James think the Baldwin apples will be good this year? James answers that, yeah, he expects so, considering the dry summer. His father just nods. But James knows this was a test, a crucial one. His father was checking to see if his son was paying attention to the entire farm, to the weather and the broader seasons, not just the corn staring him in the face. And James is incredibly proud that he passed. As the afternoon rolls around, the spheres shift into these highly specialized tasks. Mother and Clarissa are sitting by the fire, mending. Clarissa's chattering away about the Fletcher girls' upcoming wedding, and her mom is just kindly listening. Meanwhile, the father is working at his cooper's bench crafting cider barrels, with the thwack of his mallet providing a soundtrack to the whole house. James and Milo wrap up that grueling corn hauling, and little Elizabeth is running pears down the road to Mrs. Sawtell. It's like this perfect ecosystem, right? Every single member contributes to the family's survival in their own very specific way. Which brings us to Section 4, Silent Lessons and the Power of Unspoken Communication. Both siblings deeply understand their father's silent language. Clarissa notices how her dad just looks over a cornfield at dusk, somehow communicating volumes of information without saying a single word. And James knows that a brief, almost passing comment about the frost holding off the pumpkins, that actually means his father is highly satisfied with the day's conditions. Basically, there is never a wasted word in this household. James certainly doesn't learn how to farm through long, drawn-out lectures. Instead, he learns through this intense, silent observation. He watches the careful, deliberate way his father tests a cornstalk, or how he reads the sky. He internalizes his father's completely unhurried nature, recognizing this core philosophy. Rushing never actually got a man anywhere faster in the end. And watching their parents reveals the ultimate lesson for both of these teenagers. Clarissa sees her mother endure the lye soap and the endless mending without a single peep of grievance. James sees his father cut corn and build barrels without ever complaining. The takeaway here is crystal clear. For them, marriage and adulthood in 1834 meant a shared, silent, and absolute dedication to unyielding hard work. Finally, we hit Section 5, Dreaming of the Future, where the evening brings everyone back together. At dusk, the family reunites in the warmth of the kitchen. They share this hearty supper of beans, really good bread, and stewed pumpkin. James eats absolutely ravenously, which earns him some good-natured teasing from Clarissa about how proud he looks after a hard day's work. As the evening winds down, Clarissa is reading aloud from the almanac by the fire, sometimes stumbling over the longer words while her mom smiles warmly over her needlework. And their exhausted father? He finally dozes off with little Edward leaning right against him. It's right around this time that James gets to pass on his father's legacy. Little Milo, who was worn clean out from hauling corn all day, desperately wants to know if he did a man's work that day. James looks right at his younger brother and tells him yes, he absolutely did. James says this because it's true, but also because he remembers his own father telling him that exact same thing years ago. He knows exactly how much that quiet validation means. Meanwhile, listening to the sounds of her family settling in, Clarissa reflects on a conversation she once had with her father. She had asked him why he builds barrels instead of just farming, and he told her that a man ought to have two ways of feeding his family, not one, just in case fortune fails him. In that moment, Clarissa really realizes the immense, careful burden her parents carry. They work this hard because they know for a fact they can never, ever trust entirely to good fortune. As they look at their exhausted resting parents by the fire, both teenagers independently come to the exact same conclusion. Clarissa looks at her mother and hopes to be exactly that kind of patient, uncomplaining matriarch one day. James looks at the scene and realizes, hey, I want exactly this life too. I want a hardworking wife who says little about the burden, and children coming up behind me, just like I came up behind my older brother Aaron. They both want to replicate the very roles they've spent all day apprenticing in. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question, doesn't it? These two teenagers in 1834 looked at a life of unending, painful physical labor and silent stoicism, and they saw the absolute perfect blueprint for a good life. It really makes you wonder about generational legacy. How do we measure a good life in our modern, loud, convenience-driven world, especially when compared to the silent, structured, and total devotion of the Hildreth family? Well, it's definitely something to think about the next time you have to wake up before the sun.